Always fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's rock and roll.
That's what we're here for. So how are you, sir?
How am I? Yeah, doing my best day by day. And
Yeah.
no complaints.
Can you introduce yourself to my audience, people who wouldn't know you? I've been following you for quite some time now. I would love for you to introduce yourself and share what you've been up to lately.
Absolutely. So my name is Hillel Fuld, born and raised in New York, Queens. Moved to Israel 30 years ago as a teenager. And always had a deep passion for technology and kind of transitioned into the Israeli tech ecosystem, which whether some of your listeners or viewers might know, some might not know, but Israel is kind of like a leading superpower in the world of innovation. So I kind of found myself positioned in the middle of all that from a blogger, journalist, marketing guy kind of situation. And then October 7th, when everything hit the fan, I kind of transitioned over to becoming more of an Israel advocate and really shut down my my multi-million-dollar consulting business to focus on defending Israel online. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, you mentioned the success, just the success rate of Israel and the just Jews in general. Actually, is Israel like victim of its own success at this point? I really try to keep an open mind. I don't have a dog in the fight in the sense that I just, especially since October 7th, have been becoming more and more interested just by world affairs, by the conflict, by what it entails for the rest of the world as well, Western democracies. I've been reading a lot, been listening to debates, just been trying to really understand. Every time I feel like I have a grasp on the situation, it's just like the mob or just people like seem so certain of their positions, and they come at whatever I feel like I don't want to say I've solved it, but I understand what's going on. And then it just comes and blows up in the comment section like it's kind of like nothing else I've ever seen before.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it's actually a very simple, conflict, and really anybody who tries to complicate things is, it being dishonest at best and something else at worst. It's a very simple concept, very simple conflict, and it's not complicated at all.
Well, do you want to elaborate on that actually, just for like louder for the people in the back, or just try
Sure.
to explain how simple this conflict is, really?
Absolutely. So I'm Jewish. The word Jew comes from the word Judea. Judea is Israel, right? What we call today the West Bank is actually called Judea and Samaria. And the reason they call it the West Bank is because if you call it Judea, then you're basically admitting that Jews are indigenous to this land, which we are. There's not been a day, not a single day in the last 3,000 years where there was not a Jew living in Israel. In fact, the word Palestine, which is so often used today to describe Arabs, Palestine was Israel. And, we have birth certificates of Jews with their birth certificate saying Palestine. Palestine was Israel. And in 1964, an arch terrorist named Yasser Arafat basically took that word Palestine and applied it for the first time in history to Arabs. Now, to be clear, Yasser Arafat was the founder of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Now, this is 1964. There was no quote unquote occupation. So, which begs the question, what was he liberating? And the answer is Israel. He wanted all of Israel. Yasser Arafat, again, the father of the Palestinians, was from Egypt. So we understand that there is a fabricated nationality / identity here that never existed in the history of the world. There has never been an Arab Palestinian state ever in history. And anybody who doubts that, please kindly tell me when it was established or what the national anthem was, because it never existed. And so you have a group of people who came from Jordan and from Egypt who basically hijacked the word Palestinian, and their charter says loud and clear what they want. They don't want a two-state solution. They don't want to live alongside Israel. They want no Israel. They want dead Jews. Again, this is not an opinion. I haven't stated a single opinion yet. This is all in their charter. And so from the beginning of the quote-unquote Palestinians, that was their mission, to basically annihilate the Jews and to, as they say, from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea is a phrase that everyone's heard. It's time people start looking at a map and realizing what that means. That means all of Israel. And so the whole Western narrative of, well, let's give them a state is kind of actually comical, because you're basically dictating to a people who state loud and clear that they don't want a state, that they do want a state. Please take a state. They're like, we don't want a state. We don't want to live alongside Israel. And so you have one side here, Israel, that wants to live in peace and has done endless compromises and endless things to achieve that peace, including giving them Gaza. In 2005, you have to understand, we literally ethnically cleansed Gaza from Jews. We took every single Jew out of Gaza, including, by the way, dead bodies. We dug up our dead. because we knew what would happen if we left them there, which we saw on October 7th. And so there was not a single Jew in Gaza. We handed them Gaza. And yet, what did they do? Immediately, they burned down the greenhouses and they turned it into a terror state. So Israel has done, the list of things that Israel has given the, again, quote unquote Palestinians in order to achieve peace is endless. They never, as someone once said, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They've said no to it all, including 98% of what they wanted. And so, again, you have Israel on one side that wants to live in peace. You have another, entity on the other side that just wants to kill Israel and wants to kill Jews. And again, this is, this might sound like I'm oversimplifying, but please go read their charter. It's online. You can read it yourself, And so nothing that I'm saying here is, again, opinion. And in 2005, when Israel left Gaza, immediately the Palestinian people, we'll call them the Palestinian people because that's what the world calls them. But again, I have to be very clear. The Palestinian people are the Jews. Today, the Arabs are called Palestinians, so we'll go with that. The Palestinian people immediately elected Hamas, a terrorist organization, to lead them. And they've done, they've led Gaza since then. And everything that we're seeing, is a result of Hamas leading Gaza, attacking Israel unprovoked on 10/7, on October 7th. And, we're seeing a war here between good and evil. And again, the very fact that it seems confusing to anyone is a very clear indication of the disintegration of morality in the West. Because, again, you have one peace-loving people and one terror-loving people. And there really is no nuance here. It's pretty black and white. So that's really the whole thing. And again, Israel will do anything for peace. And Israel has done anything for peace. We have peace treaties with Egypt, peace treaties with Jordan. We have peace treaties with, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, UAE. We want peace. In fact, Judaism, at the very core of Judaism, peace is one of the most important, components or ideals in Judaism. So we want peace. The other side, unfortunately, does not. And so you can't make peace with someone who wants to kill you, right? And that's really where it's at right now. This October 7th massacre is, again, just another example of what their intentions are. They say it loud and clear. And again, the world says, "Oh, did it really happen? Are you kidding me? Did it really happen?" They live streamed it. Like we have HD footage, and the fact that people in the world still say it didn't happen, it's ridiculous. And so the answer to your question is, unfortunately, and I say that without sarcasm, you can try to explain the conflict till you're blue in the face, but eventually you're going to hit a brick wall and you're going to say, but why? And the answer is anti-Semitism. It all comes down to anti-Semitism. It's the age-old hatred of the Jews. It's illogical. It's irrational. But that's the reality, and that's been the reality our entire history. And so today that manifests in what the world likes to call anti-Zionism. But again, let's talk facts. 95 to 97% of Jews around the world are Zionists. So if you're saying I'm anti-Zionist, that means I am anti-97% of Jews around the world. I think it's fair to say if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Jewish. If you're anti-Jewish, you're anti-Semitic. So that whole artificial differentiation between I'm an anti-Zionist but not an anti-Semite is ridiculous. It's literally a ridiculous claim. So that's where we're at right now. And Israel is unfortunately fighting a war on 7 fronts right now. And, that's what always happens, right? They attack and then all of their, Muslim friends from around the world join in on the fight. And so now Israel's fighting, we have Gaza, we have Judea and Samaria, again, the West Bank, what people call the West Bank. We have Syria, which obviously is a whole different situation right now that Assad fell. We're fighting obviously Iran, which is the head of the snake, and they're, everything that's going on is because of Iran. They're, the Houthis in Yemen are their proxies. Hamas is their proxy. Hezbollah is their proxy. So again, we have, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and one more, Yemen. 7 fronts, right? Not to mention the online front. That's a whole different discussion. But Israel's this tiny little country, and people don't realize this because we dominate the news cycle. But the Jewish people are 0.25% of the global population, and Israel's the size of New Jersey. So let's just put things in perspective here, right? All of the news and it's a simple, explanation here. The world, the global community is obsessed, and I mean that in the most literal sense, obsessed with the Jews. Because even if you take Hamas's ridiculously inflated numbers, they're a terrorist organization. So the fact that anyone quotes them as a reliable source is ridiculous. But let's go with it. Let's say I believe Hamas's ridiculous numbers of 45,000 people. That let's double it. Let's triple it. That still is microscopic compared to actual genocides around the world. And no one says a word. Do you understand how many real genocides are happening in the world? Not a word. Doesn't make any headlines. No one's tweeting about it. There are no all eyes on, this genocide. It's all eyes on Rafah because the world's obsessed with Israel. It makes no sense. And all we want is to live in peace. That's it. This isn't an offensive war. It's called Israel Defense Forces. We are in defensive mode. We're trying to live in peace. And they are constantly attacking us. We have never started a war in the history of Israel, but we also have never lost a war. And that will be the same here. We didn't start it, but we will win it.
Yeah, very well said. I'd like to go over. I mean, we're talking about confusion and we're talking about the simplicity of the conflict, as you just mentioned, not stating opinions. And I'd really like to go over some words because there is a state of confusion. And I know people here in Canada who would never, don't even think about anti Semitism or in that way. They just hop on a bandwagon the same way they would for BLM or they would for climate activism or whatever. They're just, okay, this is the thing, right? So, but these people are using from the river to the sea, and you've mentioned that. People will use the word apartheid. I've actually published episodes with people where we discuss the conflict, and everyone keeps using the same words, the same talking points. And I think vocabulary is so important. So if we could go over just a few of them,
Yeah, I mean, listen,
because it seems
apartheid's.
like the world's upside down, right? Like apartheid. Israel is committing is a state of apartheid.
I mean, again, I want to be very clear. Forget my opinion, okay? Forget Hillel Fuld and what I think. Explain to me how there are Arab judges. We have people in Israel's parliament who are anti-Zionist, anti the state of Israel. Arabs in our parliament. What kind of apartheid is that? We have Arabs in entertainment. We have Arabs in the judicial system. We have Arabs in the legislative system. Arabs are an intrinsic part of Israeli society. One, two, millions of Arabs live in Israel freely. Three, the Palestinians, the people of Gaza, beg to come into Israel, beg to get work permits to come into Israel. Why do they want to do that? The answer is because they get more freedom in Israel than they get anywhere in any Muslim country. So the lie of apartheid is just another blood libel. It's based on nothing. You will not find a single Arab in Israel who will not tell you that he or she has the freedom to move around and to work in Israel. And it's literally a baseless blood libel. That's it. And you mentioned from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea is the state of Israel, right? Let's just say what we say intifada now, or globalize the intifada. What does that even mean? Why don't if you're saying globalize the intifada, what does intifada mean? Let me tell you what intifada means. Intifada means suicide bombers in the streets, because the first intifada and the second intifada, that's what it was. Suicide bombers in the streets of Israel, blowing up buses, blowing up cafes, stabbing innocent people. By the way, my brother was, murdered in a terrorist attack 6 years ago by a Palestinian kid. We talk about the innocent kids. He was a kid and he murdered my brother. And so, let's not confuse, propaganda for facts. And so if someone's on campuses yelling globalize the intifada, what they're doing is they're calling for inciting and calling for the murder and annihilation of Jews. Period. Full stop. There's no other way to interpret that, which, by the way, kind of makes you laugh, because it's the same people who are saying globalize the intifada, and in their next breath they're saying ceasefire now. You can't have both. Globalized intifada is calling for a violent uprising. Ceasefire now means let's hold the fire. So you can't have. But by the way, that's just one of many, many, many intrinsic, internal paradoxes within their narrative. Forget my opinion. Forget history. Forget everything. You tell me how the same people that are saying that the hostages are being fed well in Gaza are the same people that are saying there's no food in Gaza. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Which one is it? The same anti-Semites who are saying that we invented the Holocaust and it didn't really happen are the same anti-Semites yelling in the streets that Hitler was right and he should have finished the job. You can't have both. So the point is, they lie like they breathe, and their entire narrative is one big fabrication. And so it begs the question, if you actually have a real identity and a real narrative, why do you feel the need to lie all the time? Go look at my last tweet. I tweeted a video of actual Palestinians conducting CPR on a doll that they got in a toy store. It happens to be that in this video, it's very obvious. But when you see these videos, they're either taking it from some other conflict or they're literally holding dolls in their hands. I mean, there are endless videos of them holding quote unquote dead babies, and all the cameras are taking, and then 2 seconds later, you happen to see the baby under the blanket move around, because it's all propaganda. It's all lies. And the West just eats it up, which is, you either laugh or you cry. Queers for Palestine. Do you know what happens to LGBTQ in Gaza? They are thrown off of roofs. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. So if you're Queers for Palestine, I volunteer to buy you a one-way ticket to Gaza. Let's see how they accept you there. And so, again, apartheid, do you know that I cannot drive into any, Arab village, because there's a big red sign by the entrance of all the Arab villages. If you're Jewish, you can't come in here. That's apartheid. Jews and Arabs live in Israel peacefully. Jaffa is a mixed city. Jews and Arabs live peacefully. There are so many examples of that, of coexistence. So Apartheid's BS. From the river to the sea is a call for, genocide, and all of these phrases, these catchphrases we see in the West. It's time we opened our eyes, or opened the dictionary to understand what they're actually saying, because people don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Well, I apologize in advance for continuing, but I'm going to keep going over some words here that I keep hearing. Open air prison.
Right. So here, it's great. Thank you. You're giving me an alley-oop for those that play basketball, right? Open air prison. Here you go. Another paradox, right? Gaza was an open air prison before October 7th, right? We've heard that. The same people are saying, "Oh my God, life before October 7th in Gaza was paradise. Look what the Zionists did." Wait, was it an open air prison or was it paradise? Can't have both. Same thing. Just one big lie. You can't have both. Which one was it? The answer was that we lived in Gaza, the Jews lived in Gaza, we made it a paradise. We handed it to Gaza, we handed it to the Palestinians, and immediately they turned it into a terror state and turned it into hell. Now, you have to know, historically, there was not one blockade, not one restriction of movement. There was nothing around Gaza, there was no blockade, there was no nothing until they elected Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that's goal in life and mission is to kill as many Jews as possible. So then we put a blockade. But these things, they like to twist the reality, as if we left Gaza, we handed it to them, and we created a blockade. Ridiculous. We gave it to them for peace. They decided to turn it into a terror state.
The most important of them all, and I keep seeing this over and over again, I don't understand it. Again, you clarify in very simple ways. Genocide. I keep reading Israel is a genocidal state. They are committing genocide. Please go on.
Let me ask you a question. Let's put aside for 1 second the fact that the only source of numbers right now, the only source of casualty numbers is Hamas. So anybody who's saying that Israel's committing genocide has to understand, just consciously, they have to understand they are quoting a terrorist organization full of rapists, murderers, and pedophiles. That is the only source of numbers in Gaza. So you'll say, well, what does Israel say? How many does Israel admit that they killed? The answer is we're in the middle of a war. We don't have numbers in the middle of a war. Who knows how many people were killed in World War II before World War II was over? We don't know that number because we're in the middle of a war. So any number right now that's published about how many people were killed in Gaza is propaganda. That's number one. Number two, if we wanted to commit genocide, right? If Israel wanted to commit genocide and flatten Gaza and kill all the Gazans, right? Why are we sending soldiers in on foot? Why are we not using our F-16s and our F-35s to bomb Gaza to the Stone Ages and not have one casualty on our side? Why? Why are we doing that? The answer is because we're trying to minimize civilian casualties. Why are we sending in foreign aid? What kind of genocide is, what kind of genocidal people are sending in foreign aid? Why are we dropping flyers, notifying the Gazans where we're about to attack, thereby eliminating the element of surprise? Why are we doing all these things? The answer is to minimize civilian death. And the fact of the matter is, this is maybe my opinion because we don't have the numbers yet. I guarantee you, I would bet any money I have that when this war ends and the actual numbers are published, you will find out that the ratio between civilian and combatant in this war is the lowest ratio it's been in modern history in any war, maybe ever. I'm pretty sure, and again, this is my opinion from the numbers that I'm told from, I'm pretty sure that we're going to see a close to 1-to-1 ratio, meaning for every terrorist that's killed, a person's killed. In most wars, 9-to-1, 15-to-1, and the numbers are, so Israel's gone to such lengths to minimize civilian casualties while our enemies are doing the exact opposite. And this is such an important point. What does Hamas have? They have a propaganda machine. And if they convince the world that we're committing genocide, then the pressure is on Israel to stop. So they're coming up with the most ridiculous things. And for them, every dead Gazan is a PR tool for them. You understand? They want as many listen, if they cared about the Palestinian people, they wouldn't be stealing foreign aid. They don't care about the Palestinian people. Again, read their charter. What does Hamas want? They want dead Jews. So every single innocent Gazan that's murdered in this war is a PR tool for Hamas. Not to mention, by the way, and this might get a little controversial, but again, this is not my opinion, not to mention the fact that on October 7th, it wasn't just Hamas that invaded Israel. Thousands of quote-unquote innocent Gazans also came into Israel, not to mention the fact that if you go poll in Gaza, look at any poll you want, take the most liberal, take the most conservative, whatever poll you want to look at, the support for October 7th in Gaza is anywhere between 70 and 90%. So, are there innocent people in Gaza? Of course. But why is that even a relevant question? Were there innocent people in Germany? There were millions of innocent Germans killed in Germany in World War II. Does anybody question the validity and legitimacy of World War II? Since when do we count innocent people in a war? War sucks. We didn't start the war. And there are innocent people dying in Gaza. But first of all, let's put things in perspective. that the vast majority of people in Gaza support Hamas, thereby making them not innocent, number one. And number two, every innocent life that's lost in Gaza is on Hamas, not on Israel. We're doing everything to avoid that. Hamas is doing everything to maximize that. So, if there's any pressure that should be placed on anyone to end this war, it's not on Israel. Hamas has to do something very simple. Release our hostages and surrender. You're done. We're finished. War's over. No more death. Of course, the world doesn't pressure Hamas. The world pressures Israel, which is just ridiculous on so many levels.
Speaking of numbers, Hamas has stated that counting live hostages in Gaza is impossible, but promises a complete list post-ceasefire. How do you interpret this?
They're liars. That's it. That's the bottom line. You can't have both. Do they know? Do they not know? Right? I mean, listen, I think you don't have to be military strategist or a genius to understand that their only leverage are those hostages. Because if we get those hostages out, they realize what's going to happen to them. Hamas will be obliterated that day. So that's their negotiation card, right? But they don't know what's flying. I mean, people like to pretend that like it's an orderly regime that has control. They don't have control. They have no idea what's going on. They don't know who has those hostages. Some of them, yes, some of them are being held by Hamas, but some of them are being held by quote unquote innocent Gazans. We've even the hostages that have been released they've said we were held in regular homes of regular Gazans. So Hamas has no clue what's going on. They don't know how many hostages are alive. They probably don't even know where half the hostages are, and they realize that that's their only negotiating card. So they don't know what to do at this point, and they understand that in 12 days, when Trump enters office, they're in for a big surprise.
Yeah, tell me about that. What was your reaction to Trump's declaration?
Yeah, I mean, listen. People say, oh, he's not going to do anything. He's all talk. All right, let's go with that for 1 second. Even if he's all talk, let's just go with that. That's already more than Biden did. The fact that he's able to speak with moral clarity in and of itself is already an accomplishment. The fact that he's able to say that they better release the hostages or all hell will break loose, but at least he understands on a cognitive level who the good guys here and the bad guys are. Now, whether he follows up on that, the only evidence we have to study to analyze whether he's going to follow up are his actions. Has he followed up in the past? He said he's going to move the embassy to Jerusalem, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He said he's going to recognize the Golan Heights. He recognized the Golan Heights. So, yes, people, the anti-Trump, the Trump derangement syndrome people like to say, oh, he's all talk. Okay, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But number one, his talk is at least morally clear. Number one. And number two, I have no reason to believe he won't follow through on his threat. So, and on top of that, by the way, he hasn't even entered office already, but we're already seeing the Trump effect. I mean, Hezbollah agreed to that ceasefire, which was in no way in their favor because they realized that as soon as Trump enters office, they ain't going to get those conditions again. It's not an offer they're going to get once Trump enters office. So they gave in, right? And they surrendered basically, right? Why did they do that? They said they told everyone, the world, right? They said, we're not stopping until Gaza, the Gaza war ends. And they stopped. How come? Because they're scared of Trump, right? So, Trump's already seeing the Trump effect before he's entered the Oval Office. So to me, do I think that Trump is, would I hire him to babysit my kids? Probably not, but I'm not marrying the guy. Policy-wise, he's been good for the Jews, good for Israel, and good for the Western world. So I voted for Trump. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say that with the asterisk that I think he's a little bit of a loose cannon, and that's fine.
Speaking of the Trump effect, are you following Canadian politics at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too harsh, but it's a shit show over there. It's a real shit show. I mean, especially when it comes to the Jews. I mean, I was in Montreal a while back, and I don't think I could walk for 35 seconds without seeing anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas marches all over Montreal. Toronto too, but Montreal was just out of control. Jews are not safe there anymore, and it's so sad and tragic because Canada's a beautiful place, and I have tons of friends there, but unfortunately, it's gone to hell over there. And I do want to believe that since he stepped down, Trudeau stepped down right now, and then hopefully he'll be replaced by not another liberal, but someone who actually has some moral clarity that maybe Canada's salvageable. But for now, as it stands, pretty pessimistic.
Seems to be a done deal with even Pierre Poilievre. I don't know who's going to replace Trudeau, but his stance has been similar to Trump's, very clear when it comes to Israel.
100%. The question is if he's going to be the next prime minister or not.
Yeah, definitely. You've argued actually that the Israeli army is not only defending the Jewish people, but the whole of Western civilization. I've heard also Barry Weiss make that claim very, very, very solidly. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just another example. Why are we pretending this is my opinion? They say it loud and clear. Listen to what they're saying. Like the most fundamental paradox here, out of all, and the list is very long. The most fundamental paradox here is that the same people who are saying that the Palestinians deserve a state, presumably because they're adults who can govern themselves, are the same people who are saying, when they say that we want to kill all Jews and all infidels and come after the West, they don't mean it. Let's not hold them accountable for their words, but let's give them a state. So are they adults or are they little children who can't control their mouths? If they're adults who need to be held accountable to the point that they deserve a state, then they're adults who need to be held accountable for their words and actions. So it's time we believe them. And again, this isn't my opinion. Go read their charter. What does Iran say? Death to Israel, death to America. They're not coming after Israel and stopping at Israel. Israel is a buffer for the Western civilization. We see radical Islam has a very, very clear doctrine of what they want to do. They want to take over the West. They say it loud and clear. It's just crazy to me that in the West, the very people that are, yelling Islamophobia and are not listening to their, the people that they're protecting. Listen to radical Islamists. What are they saying? They say they want the West. Well, listen to them. It's crazy to me. Like you're protecting the people that you're not even listening to. Listen to what they're saying. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that what they want to do is they want to take over Israel and then move on to the West. America's, Israel's the small Satan. America's the big Satan, right? So I don't even understand why this is a discussion. It's a fact. They say it loud and clear. They want to take over the West. Period.
What are your thoughts on Zuckerberg's announcement yesterday?
So it's an interesting question. I think, I think what Community Notes has done on X, on Twitter, is amazing. I think it's unbelievable to see, mainstream media outlets that we just took for decades as reliable sources being community noted all of a sudden, that they're sharing pictures as if they're from Gaza when they're really from Syria. Left and right we're seeing this. So Community Notes has been unbelievable. It's true that, unfortunately it's being played a little bit, but nothing compared to the fact checkers on Meta, which was completely biased. I mean, I could, my Instagram, like I had, when you go to account status in Instagram, it shows you like, all of the errors, right? So when you're mass reported, you can't monetize, and all different content lowered in the feed and all that stuff. I had all of them orange, all of them. Why? Because fact checkers who were completely biased marked my post, which were completely accurate, as fake news. And so that was just, the fact checkers were just, it became, they were gamed. It was played. It wasn't unbiased. It wasn't objective. It wasn't reliable. And, I think Zuckerberg realizes this now, and it's great. I think it's a great development. Question is, how, with all due respect to X, and I love X, don't get me wrong, but we're talking different scale here. I mean, Meta's, a scale that the world has never known in terms of how many users they have. So, time will tell if this community note concept will work on Meta or not. But no matter what, no matter how you slice it, it's better than what was.
Over the holidays, I have a family member who just threw this out there, said Elon Musk is an anti-Semite. And he mentioned the ADL scandal from a few years ago or last year. What are your thoughts on that exactly? Because I saw him, with the dog tag, with the tags, with the hostage he got from the family.
Before October 7th, before this war, there was a space on X that Elon Musk hosted with basically Jewish leaders from around the world. All the big names that you've heard of, Alan Dershowitz and Shmuley Boteach and all these different Jewish leaders, rabbis, whatever it is, to talk about anti-Semitism. He could not have been any clearer that he loves the Jews. And not only that, but he then went to Auschwitz. I mean, it's a big deal when you're Elon Musk and you go to Auschwitz, right? So, there's not an anti-Semitic bone in his body. That being said, he has met with some controversial figures, and he has said some controversial things. He's retweeted controversial things, but I absolutely do not buy in any way, shape, or form that Elon Musk has a single anti-Semitic bone in his body. He doesn't. He's been very clear on his view on the war in Gaza, very clear on his view on radical Islam. He's been very supportive of the Jewish cause, very, vocal about anti-Semitism. It's an absolute, made up fabrication that he's an anti-Semite. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy because people seem more upset at Elon right now for his tirade on the whole grooming Pakistani rape gangs in the UK than the actual rape.
It's unbelievable. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the world is so backwards. It's just unbelievable. Why is no one talking? Why is the world not losing their minds? Why are these women rights activists who are going crazy about made up stories in Gaza, not saying a word about the mass rape, from October 7th, not saying a word about the gang rapes there? It's the hypocrisy is staggering. And it's as blatant as can be. And yet, otherwise intelligent people, somehow, when it comes to the Jews, blindfold, crickets. Where are they? How come they're not speaking up? It's unbelievable. And I know, I know that a lot of people get upset, like we quote unquote pull the anti-Semitism card all the time, but how else can you explain the double standard and the hypocrisy? There's no other way to explain it. So, it's a very sad situation. And, the internet, as you know, doesn't facilitate nuance. Everyone's a villain or a hero. And so some people, for Elon Musk is the villain. Other people, it's Trump. Other people, it's Biden. The world and life is nuanced. Unfortunately, social media doesn't facilitate nuance.
Can you elaborate or explain to me Norm Finkelstein? He's someone that I've listened to in debate as well, like in the past year a few times. And some people said, "Oh, go listen to him. Go listen to him." And I did. I have a lot of difficulty deciphering what he's saying.
So there's a phenomenon.
What is it from like intellectuals who are Jewish, who seem to be very, very critical of Israel and the way they're handling things right now?
Okay, so first of all, before I answer your question, it's important that I make a very important point here, which is that you can absolutely be critical of the Israeli government or perhaps even Israel as a country. What you cannot do is question whether Israel has a right to exist. That's already anti-Semitic, right? If you say, I don't like Netanyahu, great. I didn't vote for Netanyahu. Be as critical as you want. That's fine. But questioning the legitimacy of the state of Israel, the only Jewish country in the world, that's already anti-Semitic. That's number one. Number two, there is a very disturbing phenomenon throughout our history. Forever, literally. Ancient Egypt, there were Jews who sided with the Egyptians. Obviously, in the Holocaust, we had the Kappa, right? So there's always been self-hating Jews throughout our history. From a philosophical perspective, I can tell you that the reason I think these people do this, not on a conscious level, but on a, subconsciously, is they say, there's so much hatred against the Jews, so much persecution, so much discrimination. Maybe I should assimilate, and maybe I should throw my people under the bus and say to these hosts of ours, whether it's ancient Rome, ancient Greece, ancient, the Nazis, the Soviets, everyone who came after the Jews, maybe if I side with them and I say, I'm just like you, come on, let's go hate the Jews together, they'll love me. But the reality is that on October 7th, the people who were massacred on those kibbutzim were the most pro-Palestinian people there were. They were the most, strongest Palestinian activists in Israel, right? And again, we see that, in the Holocaust, people were led to the gas chambers who didn't even understand what they were doing there. They're like, I'm not Jewish, I'm German. Like, I don't even identify as a Jew. I'm German. What are you bringing me here? And Hitler said, no. You might not identify as a Jew, but your mother and grandmother are Jewish, and therefore you're Jewish. I don't care what you identify as. And so throughout our history, we had Jews who either, when it was more moderate, just didn't recognize their own, heritage and their own tradition. They just didn't identify as Jews, which is fine. That's, everyone's allowed to do whatever they want. But then there's always the Jews who side with the enemy, who throw their own people under the bus. And to me, they're the worst of the worst. I really mean that. To me, the people that side with Hamas, and wear this kippah on their head or wear whatever, whatever they wear, showing that they're Jewish, and then they side with the enemy. Those people, from my perspective, are traitors in the real traditional sense of the word and should be treated as such. So Norman Finkelstein is as treasonous as it gets. He's a blatant anti-Semite, even though he's Jewish. I'll call it a self-hating Jew, call it anti-Semite. The guy has a serious complex and a serious self-hatred. And again, it's nothing new. It doesn't surprise me. It makes me sick. It makes me nauseous, but it doesn't surprise me. This is something we've had throughout our generations, and it's something, unfortunately, that we know we'll always have.
Before October 7th, what I was reading and hearing is that Israel was very divided when it came to Netanyahu and his government. What were the criticisms of Netanyahu? Because I keep hearing like he's a monster, this and that. But I mean, and it is permitted, just for the record, to go and protest, make a cardboard sign against Netanyahu in Israel, in Tel Aviv. So what are the criticisms of Netanyahu pre-October 7th, post-October 7th that could be objectively
right? So sense? There is absolutely, in my opinion, a parallel to Trump derangement syndrome. There's Netanyahu derangement syndrome. There are people who have literally set it their life's mission to bring this guy down, and they are obsessed with him, and he could do no right. So, back in the day, it was the judicial reform, because without getting too technical here, the judicial system in Israel has disproportionate amount of power. I mean, they basically can overrule anything that any other one of the, the legislative, anything that anyone does can be vetoed by the judicial system. And they have complete absolute power. And they, of course, the judges and the judicial system are predominantly left leaning. And so the left, the leftist party of people of Israel were very happy with that status quo. But it was a system that was just broken fundamentally. And so they wanted to have this judicial reform where they basically put sort of like checks and balances so the judicial system doesn't have absolute power. But the left was very upset about that because that means they're taking away their power. Now, you have to understand, Netanyahu was already prime minister, so they lost that part. They lost, the government. They're no longer, and then at least they have the judicial system. They're about to lose that. So they lost their cool. They went nuts, and he protested in the streets. And, levels of incitement that even back in the day when Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing, Jew, and there was tons of incitement and pictures of Rabin, with a kafia and Arafat, all these things, and people said, "Oh my God, it's the right-wing, it's your fault that he got murdered because of your incitement." However bad that was, and it was bad, don't get me wrong, I'm super against that. Take that, multiply it by a zillion, and that's what we saw in the streets of Tel Aviv. It was the incitement was calling Bibi a murderer, calling him, a traitor, throwing fire bombs at his house, like real, like crazy behavior. Then the war started, and if a person cannot recognize that what Netanyahu has done in this war is unparalleled and unprecedented in history, and we could give you many examples, then they have this Netanyahu derangement syndrome. He cannot get credit for anything. But again, talking about paradoxes, right? It's the same people that say he's at the head, so he should resign after October 7th. He's at the head, he should be held responsible. But somehow when he's accomplished incredible things in this war, all of a sudden, no, it's not him. It's not him. It's the Shabak. Well, what about he's at the head? What happened that yesterday he was at the head, so he's responsible. Now he's at the head, he's not responsible. It's just internal hypocrisy, right? And so first it was judicial reform, then it was how he handled COVID, and it's how he handled the war. And it's like, oh, Netanyahu doesn't want the hostages back, dude. Like anybody who says that is just like, again, naive at best, evil at worst. I mean, this guy lived and breathed endless sacrifice for his country. He lost his brother for his country. He served in elite units for his country. Bibi Netanyahu has lived and breathed Israel for decades. So why do they say he doesn't want the hostages back? Because he's not willing to give them, 10,000 murderers to walk on the streets for our hostages back, which is, by the way, a legitimate debate. What do we do to get how far do we go? So they say a deal at any cost, release all the prisoners. And Netanyahu presumably says, listen, we want our hostages back more than anything. But we also realize that if we give them 100 terrorists for one hostage, those 100 terrorists are going to then kill thousands of people. So we got one hostage back and we got thousands of dead Israelis. That doesn't add up. So he's saying, as the prime minister of Israel, we want our hostages back, but we have to be responsible here. And so there, the anti-Bibi crowd, another excuse to Netanyahu's the devil. No matter what he does, he can do no right. Netanyahu, in my opinion, is really a once in a generation politician in terms of his brilliance and his eloquence. And, he's been in office for a long time. One might even say that he has a little bit of an ego or narcissistic thing going on here. That's fine. Maybe, he should be replaced. I'm okay with that. But somehow these people who are yelling to bring Netanyahu down don't have a suggestion for the next day. Who's going to replace him? Lapid? Who's going to replace him? They have no one even remotely close to Netanyahu in terms of skills on their side. So, okay, you could yell all day long about bringing Netanyahu down. By the way, one more paradox. The same people who are yelling day in, day out to bring the government down, when Netanyahu fired the defense minister because he was being disloyal to his government, meaning he was part of the government. He's supposed to be loyal to the government. He was being disloyal, so he fired him. The same people who were yelling, let's bring the whole government down, the next day said, oh my God, how could you fire a defense minister in the middle of the war? You were yelling yesterday to bring the whole government down, and now you're upset that he fired one minister? Like, the hypocrisy is staggering, right? So it's an obsession with Netanyahu. He could do no right, and it's very sad. It's a very sad situation, but again, it's something we see throughout our history. It's always internal fighting, and it's very sad because the Hamas smells that. That's our weakness. When we are unified, we are strong. When we are divided, our enemies smell that weakness, and we have that documented. We found actual documents in Gaza that state clearly that Hamas attacked on October 7th because they saw the internal fights and the internal struggles and the debates and everything like that, and they realized Israeli society is weak, and so they saw that as an opportunity.
So it's basically the human shield aspect of their tactics is winning the PR online war?
Oh, that's all they have. Are you kidding me? Of course, that's their main tactic. What else? They know they can't beat us militarily, so they try to invoke the compassion of the Western world, and so they're taking dolls and out of toy stores and pouring blood on it and pretending it's a baby. This is all documented stuff. I mean, literally, my last tweet was a video of a guy literally CPR on a doll. I mean, it's ridiculous. They have an entire industry like Pallywood. It's just propaganda. It's all propaganda. Again, are there situations in Gaza that are unfortunate that people are killed? And 100%. That's war. That's every war in the history of the world. So let's not pretend that oh my God, innocent people are dying. Yeah, just like any other war. Enough with the double standard when it comes to the Jews. It's ridiculous.
What's Islamophobia?
It's a made-up term. It doesn't exist. What does phobia mean? Again, this isn't my opinion. What does phobia? Open a dictionary. What does phobia mean? Phobia means an irrational fear of something. 10 to 15% of 1.8 billion Muslims in the world are radicalized. That's 150 to 300 million people. So to fear 150 to 300 million people who are dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization is irrational? That is the opposite of irrational. It's the most rational fear in the world. Have you opened the Quran? The Quran is full of verses calling for the murder of infidels worldwide. Anybody who's not a Muslim should be killed. How is the fear of that religion like that irrational? It is the most rational thing in the world. Now, are there innocent Muslims who are being discriminated against? Of course there are. And that should be stopped at all costs. Racism is bad, period. But to say that the fear of Islam, a religion that is being used right now, every single terrorist attack, the top 20 biggest terrorist organizations in the world are all Muslim. Every single terrorist attack in the history of the world conducted by a radical Islamist was accompanied by the yell of Wallah Akbar, Allah Akbar, right? God, Allah is great. So this is all done in the name of Islam. So if, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of terrorist attacks were perpetrated by people doing it in the name of Islam, how could you say that the fear of Islam is irrational? So Islamophobia is a made-up term made up by the West. Why is there no Jew phobia? Why is there no Christian phobia? It's a made-up term made up by the woke mentality of the West, and it's ridiculous because there's nothing irrational about the fear of Islam.
What's Tel Aviv like? I was discussing right now. My wife and I were going on vacation and all that, and I've always heard. I have friends and family who have been to Israel in the past, and you'll go on Google and you'll say like, if I want to travel to Israel, I want to go to Tel Aviv, I want to go visit. They're like, well, not the time, don't go, conflict and everything. But then I see videos of Michael Rappaport walking down the street and just going like, this is fantastic and it's great and apparently it's beautiful. I don't know much about Israel. I've never been.
So
I'd love to go one day.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful country, number one. Number two, everything I'm going to say right now doesn't negate the fact that we are in a war. There are people dying. There are rockets. All that exists. That's not made up. It's real. But we know, and I know that the mechanism we call media, whether it's legacy media or social media, is fundamentally broken. Why do I say that? Because it does not facilitate nuance and it does not facilitate truth, because truth doesn't get clicks. What gets clicks is hysteria and poison and lies. And so they like to, paint just, as if like, we're in a constant war zone and we can't walk an inch in Israel because there are rockets falling on our head. I just came back from Tel Aviv 2 hours ago. I'm sitting in a cafe. There was not not an empty seat in the entire cafe. Look around, there's grass, beautiful trees, beautiful. And I sit with it. And today I sat with two people who were here from the States visiting. And I asked them both the same question. Do you feel unsafe here? And they both said the same thing, independent of each other. They said, I feel infinitely safer here than I feel where I live. London, New York. So,
Montreal.
Yeah. So, I mean, you come to Israel, you would never even know you're in a war zone. Again, yes, have I been woken up middle of the night with sirens that I had to run to the security room, what we call the bomb shelter? Yes. Okay. So I sit there, and we have the Iron Dome and I hear, detonated rockets and great. And, some shrapnel falls somewhere and, yes, that's true. Those things have happened and they do happen. But Israel is absolutely, by the way, I'm not even talking anecdotally. Forget what I experienced today in Tel Aviv. The numbers don't lie. There has never been, this is a fact, there has never been a 75-year period in the history of the Jewish people in which so few Jews have been killed. I just want to repeat that for 1 second. 75 years since the establishment of the state of Israel, there has never been a safer 75 years for the people of the Jewish people in the world. There was the pogroms, the Holocaust, the Spanish Inquisition. The list is very, very long. So despite all the loss, despite all the mourning, I lost my brother. No one has to lecture me. I get it. Despite all of that, Israel is a beautiful country. Israel is a safe country. And again, this is data. I mean, without even talking about God and religion, right? I mean, we're talking about whatever, tens of thousands of deadly rockets, drones, ballistic missiles fired into Israel, and we're talking, double-digit casualties, which is horrible. Every person that dies is an entire world. But we're talking 60 people killed from these rockets in the last year and a half, tens of thousands of rockets. So let's put things in perspective here. Israel's safe. Israel's beautiful. We are in a war zone. This war will end soon. We will come out victorious. But you want to go on vacation? Dude, I give you my word. You come to Tel Aviv, you will not regret it for a second. You will absolutely have the time of your life. I just came from Tel Aviv, man. I'm meeting people here visiting from all around the world. They all say the same thing. I feel so much safer here than anywhere else. It's an amazing country.
I hope we can make that happen. I'd love to come and visit. With the rise of Islamist influence in the West, what viable solutions do you see right now?
Yeah, so I mean, to solve a problem, the first thing you need to do is identify the problem and name the problem. Call a spade a spade. All right. Anybody who's yelling Islamophobia or saying like, oh, let's bring in illegal migrants, and they're either naive or very, very, very stupid or very evil. One of those. Because it's not even like hypothetical anymore. We're seeing it, right? We're seeing what these illegal Middle Eastern migrants are doing throughout the West. We're seeing it. They're seeing the crime. We're seeing the rapes. We're seeing yesterday they came into they looted an Apple store. Like, this is anarchy, right? So let's not stick our head in the sand, and we're not going to solve this problem by ignoring it. It's a problem. Radical Islam is a global cancer, and it's spreading fast. And the reason it's spreading fast is because we refuse to take chemotherapy. We refuse to deal with the problem because it's not woke. Not woke. We can't say there's a problem. Oh my God, what do you mean? That New Orleans guy was a radicalized Muslim? Let's leave that out of the title. Let's call it the car drove into the crowd. The car drove into the crowd. The car was driving itself. It was an autonomous car. No, it was driven by a radical Islamist who had a goal of killing as many Westerners as possible. But we're afraid to say it because it's not woke. So first of all, we need to identify the problem. The problem is radical Islam, and the goal of radical Islam, its own declared stated goal, is to take over the West. So let's acknowledge that first and foremost, and then we need to deal with it. How we deal with it, it's a big problem. I don't have the right answers because we're talking about a wildfire that's completely out of control at this point. But whether it's deporting, mass deporting, whether it's people that come into the country have to declare that they are loyal to Western, ideals, which wouldn't solve the problem because there's an ideal in Islam to actually lie in order to accomplish things. So I don't have the answer, but I'll tell you one thing. We are not going to solve this problem by ignoring it. And right now what we're doing is we're ignoring it. Not only are we ignoring it, but we're penalizing the people that aren't ignoring it, right? If I, God forbid, say something about radical Islam, I'm an Islamophobe. Well, how are we ever going to solve this problem? Because radical Islam is spreading pretty fast in the Western world. So the first things first, let's acknowledge it, let's name it, let's identify it, and then let's talk about how to solve it.
Big question. Where are the feminists? What is the state of women's rights in Islam?
Oh, yeah.
I know these are really basic questions, but I keep seeing them every day here in Quebec. I live near Montreal, so
it's not basic questions, man. It's like it's crazy. It's wild to see. Where are they? Where are these women's rights organizations? Why are they not speaking about what happened on October 7th? We have HD footage of Jewish women being raped. This isn't an opinion. They're like, oh, it didn't happen. And what does Hamas say? It was the proudest day of our history. We're going to do it over and over again. The West says they didn't do it. Hamas says, yes, we did. No, it didn't happen. Yes, it did. We have HD footage. It's like unbelievable, right? So where are these feminists? Why are they not yelling about sexual crimes against Jews? I don't know. I don't know where they are. So the answer is, again, many of these organizations, and again, I want to be very clear. Like, I'm the first to promote, equality for women, and I promote women all the time in the business sector. You don't know anyone that promotes women more than me. I promote women all the time. But these feminist organizations, women's rights organizations, if they pick and choose, when they fight for women's rights and when they don't, then they're no longer a women's rights organizations, and now they're a political organization, and they're pretty clear on their stance on Israel versus the rest of the world. So where are they? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Why are they only speaking about, Gaza? Why are they only speaking about one side of this conflict? Why are they speaking about this conflict at all? Think about it. Why did the UN passed, I think, 2 resolutions, if I'm not mistaken, it might be 3 or 4, against the entire world combined in 2024, and 17 against Israel? Do you understand? Like, no matter how evil you want to paint Israel, you can't tell me that we're more evil than Iran or China or Syria, and yet no resolutions against them. 17 resolutions against Israel. It's ridiculous. And anybody with a brain in their head understands that it's ridiculous. The only people that don't want to see it and recognize it are people that, again, they want to stick their head in the sand or are crazy woke and just are not guided by critical thinking. And that's a real problem, by the way, in our generation. We're telling Gen Z to not use critical thinking. If I'm looking at someone and it's a man and that person says, I'm not a man, I'm a cat, and I'm told you have to call him a cat, what I'm basically told is don't use your brain. Don't use critical thinking. Don't believe what you see. Now, when it comes to pronouns, big deal. Person wants to be called a cat, call him a cat. What's the big deal, right? The answer is when there's a war between good and evil and you were told not to use critical thinking, you cannot differentiate between good and evil because you stop using your brain, right? So, critical thinking is something that has become, honestly, like passe. It's like, don't use your brain. Moral relativism. There's no good and bad. There's no good and evil in the world. There's only different, right? It's crazy. I mean, literally, there's literally a woke term for pedophiles. What do they call them? There's an actual term for it. Like, it's
minor attracted people.
They're minor attracted people. Like, are you freaking crazy? Like, what the? what has happened to our society? The answer is, again, look at history. We see this throughout history. An empire grows and grows and grows and reaches world domination. The first thing that it does is it throws morality out the window. And that's why there were, people put in the Colosseum to fight to death. Why? For entertainment purposes. Because morality doesn't matter. When you reach that level of influence, like the Western world has reached, morality goes out the window. And it's very sad because once morality goes out the window, the next stage is that empire falling. You see it again throughout history. Just open any history book, you'll see.
Language as well. Isn't that the story of the Tower of Babel?
100%. It's a great point, actually, because the Tower of Babel, it's in the portion of Noah, right? The Noah's Ark story in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and it's very interesting because in the beginning of the portion you have the world in chaos and anarchy, and then God brings the flood, and Noah puts together an ark and saves whatever. So in the beginning of the portion, what you have is everyone for themselves, anarchy, right? There's no collective, there's no law, everyone for themselves. And then the Tower of Babel is the exact opposite, right? The entire world was unified. We all spoke the same language. They want to build a tower to reach, and what is the punishment? The Bible says God confused the languages because it was the opposite. They were all of a sudden, there's no individualism. We're just a collective, right? So we're seeing this today. Who are the two enemies of Israel today? You got the quote unquote liberals who are all me, my identity, my pronouns. It's all about me, right? I don't care about things that are collective. I care about me. And then you have radical Islam, which is the exact opposite. It's all about, the leaders, right? You don't matter. Go blow yourself up. You don't matter. Your individual doesn't matter in radical Islam, right? It's the theology. So it's literally like a copy paste of the story of Tower of Babel. You got, on the one side, anarchists who care only about themselves. Then you got, which is all about individualism, not about the collective. And then you have the collective with zero individualism. And what Judaism has brought to the world is it's neither one of those things. It's both individual rights and the collective, right? And that's something that didn't exist in the ancient world. The Jewish people, the Torah, brought that to the world.
Thank you so much for your clarity, your generosity as well. I really appreciate your time.
It's great to meet you, and I hope I didn't say anything too offensive.
You probably did, which is a good thing in this day and age. And hopefully we'll get to meet at some point in Tel Aviv or somewhere in Israel.
Shawarma's on me, my friend. Shawarma's on me.
I got a family of 4, so watch out.
All right, done. On me.
All right. Take care, man.
Looking forward. Thanks.